Madam Moderator, some of my friends opposing the motion have sought, perhaps deliberately, to not draw a distinction between civilization, republic, and government that carry the name India. We are a 7,000-year-old civilization, but only a 70-year-old nation, a young democracy. The idea of India as a constitutional and parliamentary democracy is only applicable to 1% of our civilizational history. Therefore, to mix one up with the other and talk about an ultimate idea of India is perhaps missing the basic point. For 250 years, 190 at the hands of the British, conceptual frameworks alien to our land and our peoples have shaped the idea of India, first by the British and then by the agents of colonialism that they left behind. We have become a derivative culture rather than a culture which takes great pride in its own civilizational ethos. It is not merely a question of recreating the idea of India. It is more appropriately about reclaiming the idea of India that was suppressed but thankfully not obliterated. India's share of the world economy in 1700 was 27%. Angus Madison. This had declined to 3%. The Western economist. And I'll tell you what all the other Westerners said. This had declined to 3% by 1950. Mark Twain, another Westerner, an American, who visited India and Ceylon, what was then known as Ceylon, sometime around 1895, had the following to say. He said, so far as I am able to judge, nothing has been left undone, either by man or nature, to make India the most extraordinary country that the sun visits on his rounds. Nothing seems to have been forgotten, nothing overlooked. The 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda that the United Nations adopted in 2015 resonates with the civilizational idea of India to the farthest first and leaving no one behind. This is a reflection of the work done by Mahatma Gandhi, Deen Dayal Upadhyay, Vinoba Bhave, and others. How did we get that inferiority complex? And the promoter of the event asked some of us to focus on education. In 1835, a man called Macaulay introduced the Minute on English Education, and it is a pity that several of us speaking here, most of us are a product of that Minute on English Education, and that perhaps explains the inferiority complex that some of us are showing. This idea of India, of a poor, rural, unsecure nation, is what needs to be recreated and recast, Mr. Verma. The idea we need to pursue must be one that unleashes the power of our entrepreneurial class, of our scientific research, and those who work on our farms. In true Soviet style, as we extolled the virtues of socialism, we sat in our drawing rooms in New Delhi and drew up lofty 5-year plans wanting to hatao gareebi through a heady cocktail of slogans, subsidies, and socialism. The outcome of poverty mongering is poverty. What is it that we need to recreate today? We need to ensure that by the time we celebrate Mahatma Gandhi's 150th birth anniversary on 2nd October 2019, India will be open defecation free. We need to build toilets. We need to have 100% scientific solid waste management. We need to ensure that by the time we celebrate 2022, the 75th anniversary of our existence as an independent country, every Indian, whoever he or she may be, will have a house which he or she can own, and the title will be in the name of the lady of the house, giving gender empowerment a fillip. What is it that we need to recreate? We need to get away from the inward-looking socialism that held us back and has produced more poor people in our country than in all the world's least developed countries put together. We build 27 kilometers of roads on an average every day now, as against the 11 kilometers or so during this thing. We had 67 years of criminal neglect on of urban India, but I will not go into that in detail. In 1916, a man whom we keep quoting ever so often said, speaking at the Banaras Hindu College, that Swachhta is more important even than political freedom. It is that idea which we need to implement and ensure. That is the recreation. And we need to ensure that Swachhta, which has already become a Jan Andolan, will be carried to its extreme logical end. And now I come to the most favorite S word, secularism, which has been tom-tommed not by one, but all the gentlemen opposing the motion. India is, and always will be secular. Indian secularism did not begin with the adoption of our constitution in 1952. Sorry, that was a slip of the tongue. Indian secularism is embedded in our civilization, dating back thousands of years. We have always celebrated our multilingual, multicultural, and multi-ethnic social fabric. To that extent, I agree with Mr. Verma when he is not trying to put a political spin, which comes sometimes not knowing which side of this motion he is speaking on. What has happened during the brief history of post-independent India is the colonization of Indian secularism. What has happened is that those people have chosen to deliberately derail that discussion. And Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas is therefore a recreation of India's political and policy discourse. And what we need to ensure is that for a nation as diverse and large as India, unity and integrity as a nation must be the guiding lodestar, bringing all the diversities together in a composite whole. And that is what we today stand for, and that is what we need to ensure, if necessary, by recreating the idea of India. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Puri, for that very impassioned speech. Who goes first? Only two of you. So, Pavan Verma and Manish Tiwari, I'm giving this one to. Okay. Yes. Go ahead, Manish.
Mr. Puri, you started off by saying that there is no need to possibly recreate the idea of India. It needs to be refurbished. And then you did a U-turn or a flip-flop and started reading out your political manifesto for 2019 as to, what are the elements of recreating that idea of India. The one thing which I have not been able to understand, and you are the last speaker on that side, and I would like to ask that question once again. If you want to recreate the idea of India, what are the elements of that recreation? What are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that you would like to do to recreate, not refurbish, recreate the idea of India?
Now, since this is a serious discussion, let me try and explain the basics. No idea anywhere in the world, in any system, is ever written in stone or cast in iron. Ideas have to evolve. An idea that may have seemed logical 5,000 years ago or 7,000 years ago, when subjected to Nehruvian socialism, may need some adjustment. I'm not rejecting Nehruvian socialism. We cannot, in 2018, countenance an idea where people do not have a home, where people have to defecate out. You need economic development. And you cannot have an idea which holds you back. Therefore, the idea of India and the course correction I'm seeking is to instill some pride in us so that we can all agree to basic tenets of economic development and ensure that by the time we reach 2022, everyone will have a home of their own. By the time we are 2030, we are a $7 trillion economy instead of a $2.9 trillion economy. That the forces which held us back, whether they're on account of socialism or else, that those forces are unleashed for, as I said, entrepreneurial qualities of the Indian citizen, scientific research. I used all those templates in my statement. I'm surprised that you did not listen to it. And incidentally, we'll have enough time for 2019 manifesto. We still have a year to go. Meanwhile, we shall discuss other issues.
Right. So it's interesting, really, because the debate between whether it's an economic, is it an economic idea of India, is it a social idea of India, is it a spiritual idea of India? Pavan, you had a question? Go ahead.
No, I'm genuinely concerned that while I entirely appreciate the agenda of action, which was like a party manifesto which you spelled out. I mean, are we now reducing this to that level of inanity to say that prior to 2014, there was no sense of pride, there was no progress, nothing happened in this country, we didn't become a republic, we had no values, no pride in ourselves. I think if you reduce debates to this kind of black and white simplicities, you do your cause great harm. And therefore my question to you is, this was a serious debate on whether the very idea of India needs to change. I'm not going into the nitty-gritties of how many people, and that's exceptionally important by the way, how many people have got toilets which work and how many which don't. That's a good idea. It's a good program. We support it. But let us talk about concepts, Hardeep.
And the concept is that the idea of India is a great idea, but to keep it great, you need having course correction, and you cannot have an idea of India remaining great if you don't deliver on economic development. It's as simple as that, and that idea, yes, for 67 years you did subject all these things to criminal neglect because you were busy with inward-looking things. That's it, period. Yeah.
Sonia.
Well,
Let me just finish. One question.
But
So I agree.
That Pavan Verma is part of your alliance.
Of course he is. Therefore, that's why I said I was not understanding where he's coming out from.
That's why the debate, sir, please remember that allies can also debate.
Of course they can. And that social cohesion requires two sides to act. So that I welcome Mr. Verma's intervention.
Therefore my question to you is, as your ally, that if, for instance, in this remarkably valid task of recreating India, which you spelled out, if, for instance, 2 crore jobs are not created, if, for instance, 15 lakh rupees don't come to every pocket, so the whole recreation has fallen flat.
No,
I'm asking a question. If you reduce it to this,
incidentally, if you want another few minutes, maybe the moderator can give you, but don't trivialize it and introduce inanities. The situation,
you quoted these statistics.
The idea, I did not.
How many kilometers?
You need to get development to the people of India to keep that great idea alive and kicking.